What happened in college football yesterday was very bad for the sport overall. Winning all your games at a Power 5 school, when you've played some big-time non-conference teams, like 2 teams from the SEC, really is not that big of a deal. It all depends on how healthy your quarterback is. That's what dictates it. The fact is, results have to matter from the whole season, not just a portion of it. I feel awful for the Florida State players and coaches who basically played a whole season for absolutely no reason at all.
It's Third and Nole. We came together, all 3 of us reaching for one common goal. This is our show. Listen, you might get perspective of something that you didn't know. We gonna go all the way real with the topics. When you see Witty, P. Austin, and Crockett, pressure good blisters, we stay in the pocket. Picture the run to the quarterback option. Organic process, listen and watch us. Everyone welcome, this is our casa. First and goal, second we throw. Short a few yards, Third and Nole. Third and Nole. Third and Nole. Third and Nole.
What a podcast I expect this one to be. Here we are on the heels of winning in Charlotte against Louisville, getting the season to 13-0, ACC Championship, and we just found out the news that Florida State will be left out of the college football playoff. There's so much to dissect here, guys. Why don't we let's start with the game. Let's start with the game. So we found out that obviously Tate Rodemaker was unable to play, still in concussion protocol. Brock Glenn, true freshman, gets his first start of his career. I don't know, man. I think I even said yesterday morning I woke up feeling confident, and a lot of that had to do with our defense. And could our defense put us in a position to play championship caliber and do enough for 4 quarters to win? I think we'll talk a lot about that. But really, I guess what I can say about the game, and well, let me just pause for a second. Let me hear what you guys have to say heading into the game against Louisville.
Brand new quarterback, true freshman, who also sat out some of this first year with an injury. I think the coaching staff did a good job of scheming up things for him not to lose the game. And enough individuals around him offensively stepped up to put points on the board. We knew we didn't have to score a lot of points. We knew we needed to score some points, and we knew that we were going to lean on the defense. Going into this game, the defense was the A side, and the defense showed up, showed out, and handled business. Maybe one of the best defensive performances that we've seen this year. And I'm not just talking about Florida State defense. I'm talking about in general, the team.
Listen, I hope that we get to talk a little bit more about it. I'm going to go ahead and say that's one of the best defensive performances I've seen in my lifetime. Front to back, from the first defensive play to the final count. I mean, it was just an unbelievable effort by the defense.
It was the best Florida State defensive performance, period. I don't think anything comes close. We knew we'd have to lean on the defense. We knew we were elite in a lot of areas except for quarterback and O-line. And so I just felt as if that would prevail at the end of the day. That would be enough to beat Louisville. I didn't know how it would look. I knew we wouldn't put up a lot of points, but I felt like our team would make enough plays to win the game.
Well, and I think in a text I made the point prior to the game that when we found out that Brock Glenn was going to be the quarterback, I felt like it further incentivized win and you're in. Right, like that phrase that has been talked about, because in my mind, if Florida State could win with a third-string quarterback, that shows that they have the other 22 starters, right, or the other 21 starters, I guess, on offense and defense, were resilient enough to get it done. And again, we've got so much to unpack in that space. So let's talk a little bit about, obviously, the game was I don't even know how to describe it. It was kind of awful. Especially if you're an offensive person and like watching offense. Florida State had a really, really hard time getting anything going. Brock Glenn didn't look comfortable from the very beginning, and he didn't get any help from players. We had so many early drops that I think kind of set the early stage. And who knows how the game plays out offensively if some of those things happen the other way and we build some confidence early. But they didn't, right? And that's football. you have to, maybe I'll draw a theme here, you have to look at what happens on the field. And on the field, there is no ifs. We didn't catch the ball and kind of got behind in some areas, and it was kind of ugly offensively for the first bit. That being said, Braden Fisk set the tone very, very early in the game for what his effort was going to be like throughout, with one of the very first plays where he had a huge tackle for loss. So what were your comments? And I mean, there's really not a whole lot from the Louisville game to break down in the first half, really. We started seeing some Wildcat and stuff like that. We can talk about that, but there's not really, we don't really need to get super deep into the game as far as that is concerned. What are your comments really in the first half about the game in Louisville?
I think that it was obvious early. Adam Fuller knew the defense would decide the game. He came out very aggressive, and he was determined to put his stamp on the game. And so there wasn't any, let's see what they're going to throw at us and make adjustments at halftime. From snap one, we're taking this game over. We don't have room for error. And you can sense that by the way the defense was playing, how they came out. I mean, Fisk, the first possession, he had all 3 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, and then 1 on a screenplay. Like, the defense played possessed from snap 1, and that was everybody, not just one player, not just one segment. It was everybody.
Man, I agree. Go ahead, Carl.
And I'll just echo. I think the defense really shined bright. They showed up. Everybody on that defense stepped up. You saw a coach who all season long had been comfortable for the last 2 seasons. Safeties, too high, making sure everything stays in front of them, to really starting to really dial up blitz packages and on the defensive line, more stunts. It was perfectly schemed up. It was one of those performances where he didn't wait to the second half to make adjustments, but instead they came swinging. And so we saw their throwing their weight around, really imposing their will on Louisville from kickoff defensively. Offensively, there were some challenges, but we knew that going in. This game was really going to come down to the ability of the O-line to block up and for us to be able to run the ball. And I think there was also a part of us who we were hoping that Brock Glenn, that we heard about in fall camp, would really emerge and insert himself. But to be honest, the situation that he was thrusted into, it was really almost unfair. I know life isn't fair, but it was a difficult situation for him to be thrown into, and he did not turn the ball over. And so I think he did a great job, and the future's bright.
I don't know. I think the verdict is still out on Brock. I just, you would like to see more. I get it. He's a freshman. I was confident heading into the game that he would have had a decent game. I think he had, if you want to grade it, a D-, and the only reason it's not an F because he didn't turn the ball over. He had maybe 1 or 2 decent throws throughout the game. He didn't look good in my eyes. Now, that's not to say, that's not an indictment on where he could even be come next fall, right? I just think for this particular game, he did not look good.
But Chris, what Florida State quarterback, even going back to Jordan Travis, this season, there have been times when this offense did not look good.
Agree. I agree with that. Yep.
So with that being said, I think he followed a similar trend of how Tate performed before he was injured. When he stepped in, he got things rolling against UNA.
I'll push back to that for a second though, because I think that even in other games, like there have been spells where Florida State's offense for the last couple seasons have went dormant, let's call it. But there are also times where that was a culmination, of the entire offense, whether the running attack wasn't running well. There's a variety of reasons maybe for that. Last night, however, I think that and maybe in the past, even with Tate against Florida, let's call it, he found a groove. right? Into the second quarter, into the third quarter, he at least looked comfortable, I would say. Brock didn't look comfortable the entire game. Offensive line didn't help him out. Running attack outside of the Wildcat didn't look particularly good in the first half, and that didn't help him out. Again, we have players not helping him out by catching the ball. I mean, we had too many drops. Keon had a couple ones early. Morlock had one. Johnny had one. It's crazy. There were only, I think, 3 receivers with stats, right? Which is just an unbelievable thing. But that being said, I think that I'm not saying, again, and to be clear, this is not an indictment on what I think Brock Glenn's future is at Florida State. I think that last night, for a variety of reasons, least of which is, or maybe most of which is, could be his experience, or lack of experience rather, he had a really bad game. And it was pretty obvious that there was no circumstance that Brock Glenn was going to be the reason for the victory, but he could have been the reason for defeat.
I agree.
Let's talk a second, because I will say that, and a huge kudos to our offensive coaches for identifying the need to do something and inserting Toafili in the Wildcat. That was something we may have run once or twice this season, but to see them lean on that heavily and with success, I think was pretty telling. And it really was a jolt when we needed it, truthfully. So I just, it's just one of those things that shout out to our offense for getting something going finally. And, you go into halftime, it was one of those things where you kind of think if you can just get to halftime with the lead and we get the ball back, maybe we can open this thing up. And I don't know, man, I'm still kind of numb and mind bent on what we're going to talk about next. I don't want to diminish the Louisville game and the significance of it, because had we lost that game, the next point of our conversation really would not have mattered anyway. I don't want to say closing thoughts on Louisville, but do you guys have anything that really sticks out to you from the game that you want to talk about?
I think after watching Adam Fuller's post-game press conference was really, really telling, because apparently Tatum was hurt in the game and went to the tent, and he came out and told Adam Fuller he couldn't go. He told Adam Fuller he was done. Like, it was a knee injury. He said, I can't go. And he said Adam Fuller looked at him and said, Tatum, you're built for this. And Tatum goes on to make 2 consecutive plays. I mean, a touchdown saving play and then a touchdown saving interception, right? That essentially maybe seals the game for us. And so it's a testament to this team, man. And like you said, today there's a cloud hanging over, but I definitely don't want to take away from what they accomplished last night, right? The 13 and 0 season, ACC champs, everything that they had to overcome. We know Norvell's tight-lipped when it comes to injuries, but their offensive side of the ball was limped to the finish line, right? And so to still come out successful, to hold a team that averages 33 points a game to 6, right? And I just, it's definitely a kudos to this team and this coaching staff in an amazing, amazing year.
Hey, and I don't want to say I'm going to be the first one to say it, but I will absolutely say you can serve me a plate of crow, because there were times in the past where I was not particularly high on Adam Fuller as a defensive coordinator. And I think in those moments I had reasons to believe that. But listen, Adam Fuller, you got the job done this year. When the offense was limping, when Jordan Travis gets hurt and goes out, your defense has done nothing but played stellar. Like, second half performances all year long have been amazing. But then what you did the last 2 weeks, and then specifically from Q1 to Q4 in the ACC Championship game, and what you did against Louisville front to back was just an all-time performance. There are so many guys that I want to call out. Pat Payton, pass deflected. I think he broke a record for most pass deflected in a season by a lineman. He showed out. To your point, Phil, Tatum Bethune made back-to-back critical plays, probably sealing the game, because who knows if they score right there, especially when they had short yardage right after the punt issue. that we had. It gave him a short field position, and Tatum Bethune comes up huge in that situation. Renardo Green absolutely played his behind off last night. Jared Verse just continues to show why he is such a highly sought after NFL prospect. And Braden Fisk made himself money last night. Point blank, they gave Toafili the MVP. Braden Fisk was my MVP last night. He was an absolute monster in the game last night and absolutely impacted the game in a way that I would argue was just as meaningful, if not more so, than what Toafili did with his long runs and touchdown. But the defense just huge kudos. You could keep going. Akeem Dent had a heck of a game. Kalen DeLoach had a heck of a game. There were just so many. Fabian Lovett had a heck of a game. So much that the defense did to get the win last night. And again, I really don't care to go into a ton of specifics about the game. Florida State wins the game. They close out 13-0. 13-0 with a conference championship to hang your hat on. Now, I will tell you, it was really, really, really hard listening to the broadcast on TV when Tessitore every 2 minutes decided to insert his point of conversation into the fact that our offense wasn't performing well and are we one of the top best four teams, right? He kept feeling the need to say that. And I tell you what, Booger McFarland was carrying the water for Florida State last night at halftime. He said resumes matter, and
Solid.
So he did his part. Now I think we can let's close up the Louisville game. We'll touch on fantasy quickly because it was the last regular season game, and then we need to talk a little bit about the playoff selection committee and their ludicrous decision. Any closing thoughts on Louisville and the ACC Championship game?
No, I think you did a great job. We're not diminishing what this team has done and sealing it with the ACC Championship. This defense was stellar. Young men on offense still gave their all, even though they didn't have their leader throughout these last two games. So just much respect to this Florida State team and what they've accomplished this season and this coaching staff.
Yeah, like I said previously, just a huge congratulations to this team. They set a goal. They came out. They accomplished it. They encountered many obstacles along the way, but they still finished the job. 13 times, they still finished the job. Whether they were underdogs, whether they were down, whether it was a close game and they had to, open the game up or come back, whatever, no matter the obstacle, they won, and they won in every fashion, right? You can look at any of the 13 games. They won with offense. They won with defense. They won with special teams. They were a complete team. And kudos to Norvell and that football team, man, because they definitely gave us one of the more exciting football seasons that we've experienced as fans in a very long time.
Completely agree, Phil. And I have to, point out that last night during the broadcast and from folks who were at the game, it was just an incredible electric atmosphere in Charlotte, right? So I can't imagine mentally. All three of us huge fans, right? But could you imagine being in Charlotte at the conclusion of that game for the celebration and how happy you must have been to having the script flipped completely on you 12 hours later? So we'll get into that momentarily. Let's talk about the fantasy for just one moment. So this was the 13th game of the season. It's going to get funny from here because the bowl game and who ends up playing and who opts out and all that stuff could really affect how things kind of go down here. So
I hope we don't play in a bowl game.
I'm in favor of that too, Phil. I think you let the kids decide. I think you give the opportunity for the kids who got us to this point. But I think it would be a heck of a statement, and we'll talk more about that in a second. So, Croc, you were in third place this week. You had, I guess I just ripped the Band-Aid off. You had 34 points, 16 from Pat Payton, 9 from Benson, and then really not a whole lot else. When you had only 3 receivers with stats, that kind of hinders output. as far as that is concerned. I was in second place this week. Braden Fisk got me 30 points, and his stat line was just so ridiculous with, I think, 4.5 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss, and like 9 or 10 tackles. I mean, he just went bananas. He got me 30 by himself. I had 57 for the week. And Phil got first place, again, on the back of a defense that just played incredible. He had 70. So that gave Jared Verse got 20, Toe Philly got 17, Bethune got 15, and Fabian Lovett got 10, which was his best performance of the year as far as fantasy for our purposes are concerned. So that leads us to, as we stand today, third place Phil, 616, second place Croc, 690, and the new leader in the clubhouse with presumably one game to go, I am in the lead with 691. So I hold a 1 point lead going into the final weekend. All right, let's turn the page. You know what? Here's what I want to do. I want to start the college football playoff committee. So at this point in time, we know that Florida State is left out. They came out with the announcement: 1 is Michigan, 2 Washington, 3 Texas, 4 Alabama. Croc, I think you said as soon as they showed Texas at 3, you knew what was about to happen. I want to read from you, and you guys just kind of hot off the presses. As soon as I saw
Texas at 3, I said, we're done.
I want to read from you. This is hot off the presses. I want to read from you the statement from Michael Alford, who is the athletic director for Florida State. Okay? So again, this is hot off the presses. I have not pre-read this, so bear with me. But I want to read from you what the Florida State University athletic director has to say about this. The consequences of giving into a narrative of the moment are destructive, far-reaching, and permanent, not just for Florida State, but college football as a whole. The argument of whether a team is the most deserving or best is a fault equivalence. It renders the season up to yesterday irrelevant and significantly damages the legitimacy of the college football playoff. The 2023 Florida State Seminoles are the epitome of a total team. To eliminate them from a chance to compete for a national championship is an unwarranted injustice that shows complete disregard and disrespect for their performance and accomplishments. It is unforgivable. The fact that this team has continued to close out victories in dominant fashion facing our current quarterback situation should have enriched and enhanced our case to get a playoff berth earned on the field. Instead, the committee decided to elevate themselves and make history today by departing from what makes the sport great by excluding an undefeated Power 5 conference champion for the first time since the advent of the BCS college football playoff era that began 25 years ago. This ridiculous decision is a departure from the competitive expectations that have stood the test of time in college football. Wins matter, losses matter. Those that compete in the arena know this. Those on the committee who also competed in the sport and should have known this have forgotten it. Today, they changed the way success is assessed in college football from a tangible metric, winning on the field, to an intangible, subjective one, evidently predicting the future matters more. For many of us, today's decision by the committee has forever damaged the credibility of the institution that is the college football playoff, and the saddest of all, it was self-inflicted. They chose predictive competitiveness over proven performance, subjectivity over fact. They have become a committee of prognosticators. They have abandoned their responsibility by discording their purpose to evaluate performance on the field. Our players, coaches, and fans, as well as all those who love the sport, deserve better. The committee failed college football today. What are your thoughts on what Alford said?
Spot on. And I'm glad he was direct. He didn't waver. We've now allowed narratives to be a part of the decision-making of college football. It has officially become political. You have a team that plays football in a Power 5 conference, and let's be honest, Georgia didn't look like the Georgia of old. There were times when Alabama didn't look like Alabama of old. Michigan had games where they struggled. And so for this committee to say, and then for us to watch Alabama and potential Texas again, we've already seen that game. So I think, I don't know, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. But this is it's crazy. It's asinine.
He's spot on in the sense that everything that we know and have known college athletics to be is now gone, period. We knew it was heading that way as far as team management when we talk about NIL and the transfer portal. But now the last great thing about college football was that at the end of the day, when you're done with the pageantry and the tailgating and the traveling, that game mattered. And that doesn't exist anymore. We've allowed power, money, and entertainment to take it over. Period. The talking heads would not allow a playoff without an SEC team. And the only way they could put in an SEC team was to put in Texas. Period. And even bigger than that, everybody wanted the fun, high-scoring, entertaining game. And that's what it came down to as well. And without Jordan Travis, we were no longer the sexy, entertaining game. Never did they say we couldn't compete with any of those four teams. We're just a different team without Jordan Travis. And to Booger McFarland's point, what's wrong with winning with defense, right? What's wrong with winning with defense? Because when the SEC won with defense and they were winning championships, 10-3 and 17-14, it was all good, right? But it's a non-SEC team that if they get in, you may have to leave an SEC team out. So hold on, let's change the rules. Let's change the rules. Let's change the rules a little bit, right? This has never been done before, but now your roster matters. Okay, well, let our roster matter. But the point is, we find a way to win. 13 times we suited up. 13 times we walked out victorious, right? So you can say, but this, that, and the third. Okay, Texas had a bad day and lost to Oklahoma. Florida State has had many bad days, and we still won the game. But we're not talking about Oklahoma's horrible record and the fact that and we're not talking about the fact that Oklahoma beat Texas. And Oklahoma wasn't a good team. We're not talking about the fact that Auburn lost to New Mexico and then somehow gave
a Hail
Alabama
Mary
a 40-31.
miracle.
Forgot all about that.
None of that
forgot all
matters.
about that.
And we're talking about Florida State's 55 with strength of record. Okay, what other team in a top 25 had an out of conference schedule like we did? Like, what other team in the top 25 has beaten 8 bowl eligible teams? I don't. At this point,
it's ridiculous,
wins no longer matter. Wins no longer matter.
Your narrative matters. Your roster matters, but wins don't matter.
Yeah, they want the great story.
Yeah,
why schedule
Jordan
LSU?
Travis was our great story.
Why schedule LSU?
Yeah, Phil. Both of you guys are right. So Jordan Travis was our story, right? And I don't know if you saw this, but even Jordan Travis posted on social media that he wished he would have broke his leg earlier in the season if it had to happen, so that you could see the value of the rest of the team, and it would have squashed the narrative, right? And how shameful is it that kid has to even have that thought? Just since the announcement of the Final Four, I've seen Florida fans, I've seen Georgia fans, I've seen an Alabama fan talk about how Florida State got robbed. And really what this tells me is the ACC, and we can talk more about the decision of the college football playoff, but what this tells me is the ACC is not a Power 5 conference. It can't be, right? How do you go 13-0, win the conference championship, and get left out of the playoffs unless you're a second-class conference that is devoid of any value? There's no other justification. So the ACC is the equivalent now of the MAC or the AAC or the Sun Belt Conference. It doesn't matter. And nothing, like, the letter to get out of the ACC should have been submitted at 12:21 Eastern time, 1 minute following the fact that we were left out of the conference, the college football playoff. Because for all the reasons that you guys stated, and Phil, you wrapped it up about as perfectly as I could have stated, that it is completely turned into money, politics, and entertainment, right? But as we sit here today, and I don't, I was listening to the War Chant rap when they were doing the live view, and Tom Lane just went off, and he was so correct that all funding by FSU fans needs to go towards whatever initiative is needed to get out of this crap conference, because the ACC is as much at fault for us not being in the college football playoffs than any other outside entity, right? So we can blame and Herb Street and the SEC, they all deserve every flack and quiver pointed their way. But the ACC was completely neutered in having a voice at the table because they didn't demand a voice at the table. Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, was completely incompetent in having a voice. Sankey went on national television last night and was talking, and he validated. He went out there and made a point. And guess who watches those things? The playoff committee, right? What did Croc? Do you know? And this is a legit question. Do you know what Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, did?
I don't.
He had a press release. No media appearances.
Well,
he had a press release.
I'm not surprised.
That's my point. And so I think if you're Florida State, this decision actually gives you every bit of legal ammunition you need to get out of this conference. And hopefully that happens sooner rather than later.
You know what's crazy? And I literally just thought about this. We know ESPN's the machine. Like that's just a given, right? ESPN is the machine. And so the one of the talking points, number one, the fact that when Florida State was talked about today, they had the audacity to say, if Jordan Travis doesn't get hurt, we're not having this conversation. I was done with it after that. Second,
narrative.
Right. We talk about, we knew the SEC would push to get 2 teams in. As brilliant as Sankey is, he did get 2 SEC teams in. And I'm just realizing this. I'm just realizing this. So while the whole world was thinking they're going to try to get Alabama and Georgia in, no, he got his 2 SEC teams in. Nobody thinks about the Big 12 or considers Texas Big 12 anymore. He got his 2 SEC teams in.
It's for the same reason that the ACC, when they're showing highlights, they'll talk about Michael Vick. They'll show Michael Vick highlights as a Virginia Tech player, knowing that the Virginia Tech was not in the ACC at that time, right? Mm-hmm. Or they'll show Larry Fitzgerald highlights in the ACC highlights, and they'll talk about, history of greatness and all this crap. Larry Fitzgerald, Pittsburgh was not in the ACC at that time. So 20 years from now, they'll be able to say they had 2 teams in the SEC in this final college football playoffs.
Brilliant.
And
masterful.
Brilliant.
Yeah, 100%. And again, let's not be foolish to, so we can talk about Sankey. Listen, Sankey is a mastermind. He puppeteered the entire game, the system, and ESPN was perfectly willing to follow suit because they're hand in glove. They are absolutely hand in glove. They are financially tied to one another. So there's no reason for them not to. There's zero reason for the talking heads at ESPN not to support having as many SEC. That's their inventory. That's how they're going to get paid going forward.
Yes.
And they know, even though
and
ACC
so how do we expect
is ESPN affiliated also? Go ahead, Phil.
No. Go ahead.
I was just saying, for those who may listen to the pod and say, well, isn't the ACC affiliated with, Disney, ESPN? ESPN knows their product. They know where the money is. And that's what this was. This was about the money.
Hey, the ACC doesn't have the SEC doesn't have a contract. The SEC doesn't have a contract with the CW. That's all you need to know about who drives the ESPN money wagon, right? Phil, what was your comment earlier?
How do we expect the sanctity of a college football playoff to truly be that when the money machine and the top product are making the decisions? Like, that part I will never understand. And then they talk about, this has never happened before. It speaks to, having so many great teams at the end of the year. No, it doesn't. It speaks to, this is the first year that there was a possibility an SEC team would have to get left out and deserved to get left out of the playoff. Period.
Hey, you want to know something that's really wild? Think about this. Had this been the first year of the 12-team playoff, Florida State would have maintained a number 3 or 4 ranking and had a first-round bye.
Absolutely.
Because there would have been no pressure. There would have been no pressure. There would have been no pressure to try to get Texas, Alabama, and even Georgia back in. So they'd have left Florida State in the top 4 with a first-round bye, no questions asked, if this whole scenario had played out 1 year from now.
I'm undone.
I will. Let me say this. I've been a Florida State fan my entire life. I feel like in the last 3 years, we've seen a hyper movement toward something that is unlike what I grew up being a fan of, right? For things for better or worse, right? When you talk about NIL and things like that, conference affiliations and all the money that is now in college athletics, it is a shell of the sport that I grew up watching as a kid, right? And I just feel like this is a huge step toward college football not mattering to me. Am I still going to be a fan? Yeah, I'll be a fan. Am I still going to root for Florida State? Yeah, I'll still root for Florida State. But I do feel as though I have less of a vested interest moving forward when you see there are outside narratives at play that really doesn't matter. And being 13-0 and being excluded from an opportunity. So you could talk about best teams and all this stuff. Florida State had a defense that could compete with any offense in the country. We've shown that. Florida State has a team that has not lost on the field of play, in 20 straight games. There is absolutely no reason in my mind that Florida State wasn't deserving of an opportunity. I'm not saying they would have won a national championship, but they were deserving of an opportunity to try. And when politics and entertainment and talking heads and money get in the way of that, it dampens my enthusiasm for the sport.
That's why you line up and you play the game. You line up and you play the game because at the end of the day, the men that are lined up across from you, they have to lace up to.
I agree. Look, my son's first reaction was, okay, we haven't lost. They have. What's the point of playing the game if the wins don't matter? Literally, that was his response. What's the point of playing the game if the wins don't matter?
Participation trophies, man. Society in general, we've moved on, and maybe this is symptomatic of that, huh? Like, now, let's talk for a second. I think they've announced that Florida State will play Georgia. Am I correct on that, or that's the assumption that Florida State and Georgia will play in the Orange Bowl?
I would not. I'm telling you, if I was Florida State, I would not play in the bowl. I would tell the Orange Bowl to go ahead and call Louisville because we're not coming.
I agree with you. So, but if you make an assumption that Georgia and Florida State is the Orange Bowl, and that's the selection, I haven't seen that confirmed 100%. And I'm with you, Phil. I agree with you. I think the Florida State says kick rocks, and it's a protest. But here's the thing, though. Here's why I say that. There is zero reason, and before I even go down this road, and I don't know if you guys have thought about this, we got to see Jared Verse play out of his mind for the second weekend in a row, right? We got to see Braden Fisk and Fabian Lovett do some good things. We got to see Tatum Bethune and Caleb Deloach play out of their mind. Keon Coleman had a phenomenal year. Jaheim Bell had moments. There's a really good chance we don't see any of them in garnet and gold, regardless of what happens with or without a bowl game. If I'm Keon Coleman, why? We got shafted by the playoff committee. We're not playing for anything at this point other than, pride? I would sit out. So even if the team as a whole doesn't play, we're not going to see the same Florida State team. And then that's almost an unfair assessment of how Florida State is. So we go and play Georgia with 60% of our starters deciding to opt out of that game as a possibility. I'm not saying I don't know what's going to happen there. And then we get thumped. And then that validates everybody It validates everybody's opinion of who we are and where we belong.
I'll just circle back. Even though a part of me feels the same way you all feel, Norvell preaches competition. There's no way he's not going to get these boys ready to line up into play.
But
yeah, I know we've been raw, but let's take it out on our opponent. I don't think you can walk away from opportunity to play the game. Also, how do you sell that to the incoming class and to the transfer portal?
You don't have to sell them anything. They saw it. They saw with their two eyes exactly how we got screwed. Like, what's the point of playing it out?
The point is go in there, line up against an SEC team or whomever, and beat them and prove the committee that they had it wrong.
I don't know, man. I think in a perfect world.
No, man. The committee chose their four. The committee's out the door. The committee doesn't care. We could beat Georgia 100-0. The committee's not going to say, "Oh man, we got it wrong." They're probably not even going to check the box score. They're out the door. Their job is done. Like it's like that's over with. And the thing is, like to Chris's point, like, dude, I'm all for competition. I am all for riding with your teammates and going out there and getting the job done. But if we're talking about caring for players as much as you care about winning on the field and the way this offense limped through the finish line, there's no way I expect Keon Coleman, Trey Benson, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk. I don't expect them to suit up, period. If anything, they're probably recovering, getting ready for the combine because they've all played hurt the last half of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you, Phil. It's a gut punch, and Croc, I get your point, right? Norvell is big on the team component and playing for the guy next to you, but at the end of the day, there's also, on the other hand of that, an opportunity to send a message, a loud and clear message, like, you completely screwed Florida State over. This is our protest to that knowledge, right? And to you saying, how does that look to an incoming class or recruits or whatever? You don't need to make a point. The College Football Playoff Committee made a point, and this is your retaliation. So I would argue that if anything, it shows the other side of that. You have an institution that's willing to absolutely go to war on behalf of the student athlete to validate a terrible injustice.
This whole season, Norvell has preached and hammered and responding. You can't respond by not suiting up, But I'm upset, and I get it. I think in any other situation, I would be the one that would be leading with a little emotions. But I think in this case, it's still so fresh. But Phil, I've suited up with you. So, Chris, y'all suited up together. Y'all not walking out of no game. If there's a game to be played, y'all boys are suiting up.
So that being said, we can kind of, emotions are high. So Norvell actually just released a statement, and I think we can maybe close out with his comments. With his comments. So this is Mike Norvell's statement regarding what the College Football Playoff Committee's decision. I am disgusted and infuriated with the committee's decision today to have what was earned on the field taken away because a small group of people decided they knew better than the results of the games. What is the point of playing games? Do you tell players it is okay to quit if someone goes down? Do you not play a senior on senior day for fear of injury? Where's the motivation to schedule challenging non-conference games? We are not only an undefeated Power 5 conference champion, but we also played 2 Power 5 non-conference games away from home and won both of them. I don't understand how we are supposed to think that this is an acceptable way to evaluate a team. I'm hurting for our players who have displayed a tremendous amount of resilience in response this season. What happened today goes against everything that is true and right in college football. A team that overcame tremendous adversity and found a way to win doing whatever it took on the field was cheated today. It's a sad day for college football. I'm proud of the work we have put in and the players I have the privilege to coach. We have one more opportunity to define this 2023 team in the Orange Bowl, and I believe our team will respond. So there you have it. I hope that there's a good showing. I don't agree with it. And I hope by the next time we do a podcast, we've got some news about us getting out of the start.
Third and Nole.
We out.